Hello? You're watching movie snapshot scenes, and this is the summary of A Quiet Place. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The world had changed. Once filled with sound, cars, laughter, footsteps, the rustling of everyday life, it had now fallen into a haunting silence. Cities were abandoned, towns lay in ruins, and the few survivors that remained tiptoed through life, terrified of making a single noise. They came without warning. Creatures, fast and merciless, with armored skin and no sight. But they could hear everything. The faintest whisper, a breath, a dropped toy. And when they heard you, they killed you. On day 89, the Abbott family moved carefully through the ruins of a small town. Lee, the father, led the way, his eyes scanning for danger, his bare feet silent against the dusty floor of an old pharmacy. Evelyn, his wife, followed with their daughter Reagan and two sons, Marcus and Beau. They spoke only in sign language. Beau, the youngest, was drawn to a toy rocket left behind on a shelf. His eyes lit up, a spark of innocent hope in a world that no longer allowed joy. But Lee saw it and shook his head. Too noisy. Still, Reagan, wanting to comfort her little brother, gave the rocket back to him without its batteries. But Beau, curious and clever, quietly slipped them into his pocket. They left the pharmacy in single file, walking barefoot down an empty road surrounded by whispering cornfields. The family moved like ghosts, completely silent. Then it happened. A sound. The toy rocket beeped to life in Beau's small hands, its cheerful beeping echoing through the silence like a death sentence. Lee turned, eyes wide with horror. Evelyn gasped. Reagan froze, and from the trees, it came, a blur of black, slicing through the air with impossible speed. In seconds, it was over. Beau was gone. The family stood in stunned silence, unable to scream, unable to cry. Only the wind answered, them. From that day forward, the silence wasn't just survival, it was grief, and it would only grow louder. Over a year had passed since that tragic day. The Abbotts now lived in the remnants of an old farmhouse, carefully transformed into a haven of silence. Every detail of their lives had been restructured. Paths of soft sand stretched between buildings, meals were eaten without clatter, and every creaking floorboard had been memorized. Lee spent his days scavenging through the forest and abandoned towns, searching for supplies, studying the creatures, and trying to build a functioning radio, hoping, somehow, to reach someone, anyone. But the world remained silent. Reagan carried guilt like a shadow. She blamed herself for Beau's death. She avoided her father, convinced that he blamed her too. Her cochlear implant, a broken, imperfect device, sat behind her ear, useless. She longed for connection but felt only distance. Evelyn, now heavily pregnant, prepared for the unthinkable. Giving birth in a world where a baby's cry could summon death, she practiced breathing through pain in silence. She reinforced the basement with towels, mattresses, and soundproof walls, transforming it into a fragile cradle of hope. Marcus struggled with fear. Every day, the threat of the monsters loomed, like storm clouds overhead. But Lee tried to teach him strength, how to fish in the river, how to listen, how to survive. In a world of terror, knowledge was a weapon. The creatures were always near. Sometimes, they could be heard in the distance, swift, clicking, patrolling. Other times, they were closer, hidden in the cornfields, just beyond sight, waiting for the tiniest mistake. One evening, lightning cracked across the sky. For a brief moment, it masked all sound. It was the one time the family could speak freely, shouting across a waterfall or whispering beneath a rumble of thunder. But those moments were rare and precious. In this new world, survival meant sacrifice. Love meant protection without words, and the silence, once a choice, had become their prison. Every breath was calculated, every step was a risk, and Evelyn's due date was drawing near. A child was coming, loud, fragile, alive, and nothing, not even love, could silence a newborn's cry. The sky was grey, heavy with clouds, as if the world itself held its breath. In the basement of the Abbott home, Evelyn's contractions had begun. The time had come. She moved carefully, every step a war against pain. Upstairs, the others were away. Lee had taken Marcus to teach him about survival near the river, and Reagan, still feeling estranged, had wandered off toward Beau's memorial in the woods. Then, a picture frame fell. The glass shattered on the wooden floor. The sound, sharp and sudden, echoed through the silence like a scream. Evelyn froze, her breath caught in her throat, and then she heard it. The familiar clicking, the scraping. Something was inside the house. Her eyes filled with fear. Blood trickled down her leg. The baby was coming. She flipped on the red lights around the property, the silent signal for danger, and descended into the basement, breathing through her agony. She prepared the space as best she could, muffling every movement, every gasp. But pain is loud, and life refuses to arrive quietly. Upstairs, the creature stalked the halls. Its long limbs tapped across the floorboards, ears twitching with monstrous sensitivity. Evelyn covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face, biting down a scream as another contraction tore through her. Outside, Lee and Marcus saw the red lights. Lee's eyes widened. He knew what they meant. He ran, fast, faster than ever. Back at the house, Evelyn couldn't wait any longer. She climbed into the bathtub, the creature lurking just beyond the curtain. She reached for a timer, set it, and let it fall. Beep, beep, beep. The sound drew the creature away, just long enough for Evelyn to let go. A single cry escaped her lips as her baby was born, wet and crying. Lee arrived moments later, breathless, and followed the trail of blood to the bathroom. There, in the tub, Evelyn cradled her newborn. Alive. Somehow, alive. But their nightmare had only just begun. A child now cried in a world where silence was survival, and the monsters, they had, heard it too. The red lights glowed like warning flares against the night, casting a crimson hue over the cornfields. The storm had begun. Evelyn lay weak, bloodied but determined. Lee helped her into the improvised soundproof cellar, padding the tiny box, with blankets and pillows. The baby, wrapped tightly in a small bundle, whimpered, his cries faint but dangerous. Evelyn placed a tiny oxygen mask over his face, muffling his breath. Above them, something moved. The creature was still inside. Lee grabbed his shotgun and flashlight, motioning for Evelyn to stay hidden. He crept through the house, every footstep, a careful whisper. But it was no longer just about staying silent. It was about buying time. Meanwhile, Marcus and Reagan were returning. Reagan had seen the red lights too, her heart pounding with guilt and fear. She didn't know what had happened, but she knew it was bad. As they neared the house, Marcus tripped, falling into the cornfield and knocking over a lantern. The sound echoed, and the corn moved. The creature lunged from the shadows. Marcus screamed, running with everything he had, leading it away from the house, into the towering stalks. Reagan followed, panic in her eyes, struggling to keep up. Then, the grain silo. They climbed inside, thinking it safe. But the silence was deceiving. The floor beneath them gave way. Marcus plunged into the grain, sinking fast. Reagan jumped in after him, fighting to pull him out. Suddenly, the creature was inside. It thrashed through the metal, blind but furious, triggered by the sound of shifting grain. Reagan's implant began to emit a sharp, high-pitched feedback. She winced, but the creature froze. It screamed in pain. Something in the frequency hurt it. The siblings escaped as the creature reeled. It didn't chase. Back at the house, Lee found them. Relief flooded his face, but it didn't last. Another creature had followed the noise. It attacked. Marcus screamed. Lee knew what he had to do. He turned to Reagan, signing something with trembling hands. "I love you. I have always loved you." Then he stood tall, and he screamed. The creature lunged at him, and Lee Abbott was gone. The silence after Lee's scream was unbearable. Reagan stood frozen, staring at the place where her father had fallen. Her heart pounded, not just with grief, but with shock. He had sacrificed himself, for her, for Marcus, for the baby, for all of them. Marcus helped her up, and together they stumbled back toward the farmhouse. Evelyn, still hiding in the cellar, held her child tightly as muffled chaos shook the house above her. Dust rained down. The wooden stairs cracked, and then, with a groan and a crash, the water pipes burst. Water surged into the basement, rising fast. The baby's oxygen tank floated beside her. The tiny cries were getting louder. Evelyn gritted her teeth and climbed onto a mattress, trying to keep the child dry and quiet, but the water climbed higher with each breath. Then she saw it. The creature was in the cellar. It slipped into the flooded space like a demon born from nightmares. She held her breath, clutching the child, praying it wouldn't hear the heartbeat pounding in her chest. The creature's head twitched, clicking softly, sensing its prey. Upstairs, Reagan and Marcus burst into the house. They heard the splashing below. Reagan's eyes widened. She knew her mother was down there, trapped. Then came the feedback. The high-pitched screech returned, louder than before. Her implant again. Reagan winced, clutching her head, but so did the creature. It shrieked in pain, its armored shell quivering, its body recoiling. Reagan realized something. This sound, this frequency, it was a weapon. She turned to Marcus. "The basement," she mouthed. They rushed down, just as Evelyn, soaked and shaking, emerged from the water with the baby. They embraced, their grief crashing down on them, but there was no time to cry. The creature returned, furious and confused. It charged. Reagan stepped forward. She removed the implant from her ear and placed it near a microphone. The sound amplified, rising like a siren. The creature screamed, stumbling, its face splitting open like petals in agony, and Evelyn didn't hesitate. She aimed, she fired, one shot, one kill. The creature collapsed, dead. But through the security monitors, more movement appeared. Two more creatures were sprinting toward the house. Evelyn looked at Reagan. Reagan nodded. She turned up the volume. This time, they were ready. The silence had been broken. For over a year, the Abbotts had lived in terror, tiptoeing through life, afraid to breathe too loud, unable to mourn, to laugh, to scream. But now, for the first time, a sound had not brought death. It had brought a chance. The body of the creature lay twisted on the basement floor, its armor pierced, its head shattered from the shotgun blast. Reagan stared at it, stunned. The weapon hadn't just been the gun. It had been her implant. Her perceived weakness had become their greatest strength. Above them, the security monitors flickered. Two more creatures raced across the field, drawn by the noise. Their limbs skittered across the earth like sharpened knives. Time was running out. Reagan didn't flinch. She stepped toward the microphone again, this time with purpose. Evelyn looked at her daughter, not with worry, but with something stronger. Pride. Reagan placed the implant close to the mic. The feedback screamed through the speakers, loud and relentless. The frequency pierced the air, rattling the walls, shaking the very foundation of the house. Outside, the creatures stumbled. They slowed, and then they howled. Evelyn loaded the shotgun, her hands steady. Marcus stood beside her, holding the newborn close. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about taking back control. The monsters crashed into the house, no longer unstoppable, no longer invincible. As they entered, their armor peeled back, their faces split open, exposed and vulnerable under the deafening frequency. Reagan narrowed her eyes. She understood now. This was how they would fight, one by one, with sound, with strength, with everything they had left. The screen cut to black just as Evelyn cocked the shotgun again, eyes fierce. This wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of something new, a world where silence no longer meant fear, but a tool, a strategy, a choice. And when sound came, it would not be met with screams of terror, but with the roar of resistance.